want to talk about how you can take better photos. Specifically DSLR photography. If you don't have a DSLR, then this video probably won't be as useful for you, although it can give you an idea of what professional photography is like. You want to treat a photograph as a piece of art, not just you see something cool and then pull your phone out and you press the button. No, you need to consider how to use the camera to your advantage to make a good looking photo. This isn't going to be a video on how to make a cool photo and upload it on Instagram straight from your phone. Putting in the time and effort into making a really good looking photo requires patience and practice, because you're not going to get it first try, let's be honest. I want to discuss the different parts of a DSLR if you don't know them already. Basically, there's the zoom ring, which affects the camera and how far zoomed in it is. Usually you want it to be as zoomed out as possible to avoid like loss of quality, because if you zoom in, obviously stuff is going to be like pixelated and you don't want that. There's the focus ring. The easiest way to explain focus is if you stick your finger up and you look straight at it and you can see the background is blurry, whereas if you concentrate on the background, then your finger will be blurry. That's basically the same thing with the camera, except you have to tell it whether you want it to focus on the finger or the background. Focus is really important to making a really high quality photo, because focus basically tells the audience where you want it to look. It's not really pleasant to look at the blurry part of a photo, so your eye naturally makes its way to the focus part. There's the focus setting. There's a little switch on the lens which gives you the option to let the camera focus for you or let you focus on your own. If it's on autofocus, the camera will focus on whatever is in the center automatically. If it's on manual focus, then you can tell the camera what to do and where to look by spinning the focus ring. The camera modes dial is basically what lets you choose what shooting mode you want the camera to take your photo in. There are three main shooting modes or camera modes that I'm going to be talking about in this video, and that's aperture focus, shutter speed focus, and manual, which basically affects how your photo looks by affecting the different parameters. There are three main parameters that you need to consider, those being shutter speed, aperture, and ISO speed. Shutter speed is probably the easiest to explain. It's basically how long the camera is exposed to the world, basically, to the environment. The lower the shutter speed, the longer the camera will stay exposed, the more light, the more information will enter into the sensor. If you want to shoot handheld, you're going to need the shutter speed to be pretty fast, like 1/500th of a second, 1/1000th of a second. In that range, most movement will not be seen. So you can take a shot of, say, someone running, and there won't be any blurriness in their hands or their legs, and it will allow the photo to be clean. A low shutter speed can be useful when you're taking a photo of, let's say, stars. So stars are not exactly the brightest thing in the world, although it might seem like it, but the camera has a tough time absorbing light from stars. Therefore, if you set the shutter speed to be really slow so that the camera is exposed for a longer time, then there is more light coming in from these stars, and therefore the stars will stand out more in your final photo. If you shoot with a low shutter speed, usually you want a tripod, because if the camera moves while the shutter is open, the whole photo is just going to look horrible. So you want the camera to be stationary while the shutter is open, which is why having a really high shutter speed is useful when shooting handheld, because then it'll remove any blurriness or movement from your hands affecting the final shot. One of the capture modes that I said before was shutter speed priority, which basically lets you choose the shutter speed and the camera will determine the other two settings on its own. If you want to, say, take a photo of something that's moving, you can switch to shutter speed priority, set the shutter speed really fast, and the camera will do the rest to make sure that the photo is balanced in terms of light and dark. That's basically exposure in a nutshell. You want your photo to be balanced between light color and dark color as much as possible, because then in editing you can affect it and it won't lose as much quality as it would if the photo is really dark, for example, and you want to brighten it up. That's not going to work as well as if you just have the photo balanced from the beginning. Let's move on to aperture. Think of aperture as how wide the camera lens is. If there is a really high aperture, then the camera lens will be really open and will have a really low depth of field. Depth of field goes hand in hand with focus. It basically makes the background blurry. For example, here's a photo that I took of Damien with high depth of field, and as you can see, the background is not blurry and you can see it, and it's sharp. The whole photo is sharp, and that's because the camera lens is far open. Whereas if you set the camera aperture to really low, the camera lens will also be really low, and thus it will have a much higher depth of field. Therefore, you can see that this other picture I took of Damien, basically like at the exact same time, but with a really low aperture, the background is blurry. That's because I was focusing on Damien, and the low aperture made it so that the main thing that the camera was concentrated on was Damien. Higher aperture is really useful when taking landscape shots, because then that gives the photo overall a sharp look and makes everything seem in focus. And once again, it goes back to that mentality where your audience will naturally progress to the sharper looking part of your photo instead of focusing on the blurry part, which is not what you want. You want it to direct the audience into looking where you want them to look. Finally, let's move on to shutter speed. Shutter speed can be thought of as sensitivity. Basically, inside the camera, inside the lens, is a sensor, which can be thought of as an eyeball. And when you take a photo, it's like opening your eye for a really short amount of time. ISO affects how sensitive that eyeball is to light, which means that if you have a really high ISO speed, light will affect it a lot more than if it had a really low ISO speed. ISO speed is useful when you can't really change the other two parameters and the shot is still too dark, and you can use ISO speed to let the camera absorb more light and therefore get a better shot. However, with that comes a trade-off where the higher the ISO speed, the more digital noise will be present in your photo. Noise is not what you want. It degrades the quality of your photo and basically makes your photo look like a bumpy mess. A good looking photo has really smooth shadows, and if you have a really high ISO speed, it will make the shadows look bumpy like porridge. ISO should really stay as low as possible and should only be changed when you can't sacrifice the other two parameters. So I've talked about 2 out of the 3 camera modes. The final camera mode is manual, which simply put, you just have control over everything that the camera does. You have control over aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, and should only realistically be used when the camera does something that you don't want automatically. It puts you in full control, but full control isn't always the best. It's like a triangle, and if if you change one and let the camera affect the other two, then your photo will be simpler to create. It doesn't really make it any worse. This is kind of a new style of video than what I'm used to. So let me know what you think about it down in the comments, and if you have any questions, I'll answer them down below. Don't forget to hit the bell so that you know when a new video comes out, if it ever does. And also, in the last video, I announced a giveaway. The winner of that giveaway is Bobby Woo. Congratulations. Please message me to talk about your prize. I'm not really sure that you want 2 cans of tuna. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.